Good morning, everybody. I'm Larry Jacobs. This is Pre-K-12 Education Talk Radio, May 8th, 2024, and we have a wonderful pair of guests for you here today. We're going to talk about urgently repurposing education for a new era of education. And we've got the authors of a book, basically the same title, New Era, New Urgency, The Case for Repurposing Education. I've got F. Joseph Merlino. Joe Merlino is here, the president of the 21st Century Partnership for STEM Education. And with him is co-author, Dr. Deborah Pomeroy. Dr. Pomeroy is a professor emeritus at where I got my master's degree at Arcadia University outside of Philadelphia. She was a science education professor there. She has worked in scientific research. Then she went into teaching high school science in Fairbanks, Alaska. Okay. Then she taught for 14 or 15 years over at Arcadia. And then they both have worked overseas, particularly in Egypt. We're going to talk about that, to repurpose schools over there for, the U.S. Agency for International Development. They wrote this book based on their experiences, and we're going to be talking about how we have to look at education in this new era. I hope I summed that up pretty well. I'll bring them on in just a second. Just let me remind you to go over to ace-ed.org, our home website of the American Consortium for Equity in Education, ace-ed.org. Our new issue of our magazine with all the Equity Awards winners is up there. Check it all out, or how to get involved for next year's contest. And also all the podcasts are over there like this one, ace-ed.org. Please go over there and check it all out. And with that said, I'm Larry, and this is Deborah Pomeroy. Hi, Deborah. Larry.
Good morning, Larry.
How are you?
Good morning.
Are you still in Philly?
No, I actually retired, and I'm up in Vermont.
Close to me. I live in Maine. I'm not in Philly anymore either. Yeah.
Great.
We have New Hampshire in between us, my dear.
We do. That's indeed, yeah.
Welcome to the show. Joe, are you there?
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
I am here, Larry. Yes,
Philly?
I'm here.
Still Philly? Where are you?
Still Philly. And by the way, I got my master's at Arcadia.
Yeah, we had written about that.
Yeah.
That was really cool. Deb, you'll appreciate this. Right across literally across Glenside Avenue, there used to be an apartment complex called Cheltenham Terrace.
Oh,
Deb?
yeah, I remember it.
Yeah, and that's where I lived when I first started teaching in Cheltenham.
Oh, for
with a bunch
heaven's
of other
sake.
teachers. Yeah, so I lived there, and then I was in the first class of people that got their master's degrees at what was Beaver College.
Yes,
okay?
indeed.
So
it's a small world, huh?
It is a small world, but as they say, I wouldn't want to paint it, okay? And you've been all over it, both of you, okay? Alaska, Egypt. I don't know where you want to start here. I just want to say I have it linked. Your book that you guys co-wrote, New Era, New Urgency, The Case for Repurposing Education, which you have, and I know you do it here, but you specifically did it in Egypt for many years, helping the Egyptian government repurpose. I'm going to let you guys tell me where you want to start. Okay, do you want to start with what you did in Egypt? I'll have to go to Joe here. Do you want to start with Egypt, or you want to talk about the book? Go ahead, just do it. Just start wherever you want to set up the interview today. Go ahead.
Okay. Joe. All right, thank you. So both Deborah and I have been in education for many years, decades. Deborah, she can talk for how long? But it's been. But I started
when
80s.
she was 7. She's only 29 years old.
That's right.
For Joe. We'll just leave it at that. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
So I started off in the 80s as a math teacher after Arcadia, and then I got into education reform. And so I rode the wave of education reform that was part of the Nation at Risk report back in 1983, which was college and career success and global competitiveness. And so focusing on math and science. And after many, many education reform projects that I directed, our conclusion was that, we're actually not doing things that are relevant to what kids need. And I was a math teacher. So,
yeah.
And
where did you teach? Let me ask, where'd you teach?
I taught at Upper Chichester.
There you go. Okay.
Yeah. So, and so I followed, and the whole idea of that era of we came out of that global era of, Ronald Reagan type. And we realized that we're actually in a different era right now. And we started to write this book 12 years ago, actually probably 14 years ago, and we got a small grant to do it, talking about the need to make it, the whole purpose of education needed to be articulated, and that's when Egypt happened. And I'll let Deborah pick up the story about Egypt.
Yeah. Well, so I had actually retired up here to Vermont, and I got a phone call from Joe saying that a group of people were going to visit us at our offices down in Conshohocken, just outside of Philly, and they wanted to talk about changes and sort of new trends in STEM education. And apparently this is a delegation that was being led by the Minister of Education from Egypt and some of his deputies. So I drove down to Philly, and we put together a series of presentations on the kind of work that we had been doing and thinking that we had been doing around STEM education. And so this group arrived at our office, and we did about a 4-hour series of presentations, and Joe asked the important question. He said, well, when are you planning to do this? Now, this was I think it was in August. And the minister said, well, we're planning to open the school in September.
There you go.
And so we said, well, what do you have in terms of facilities? And he said, well, we have the buildings, but there was no equipment that had been ordered, no textbooks. There was no curriculum.
They were a month out.
Yeah, a month out, and the teachers had no training, but the kids were going to arrive, and so Joe said, well, good luck, and what they had is they had a dream. They had a vision of what they wanted to achieve. And they realized that they had to strike quickly. This was right smack in the middle of the Egyptian Revolution, if you recall. And
you mean
so,
like during the Arab Spring type revolution?
Yes.
Is that the one you mean? Yeah.
Right.
2011.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, and so they knew that they had an opportunity to do something, and so they knew they had to move quickly, but they really didn't have anything set up in terms of structure or curriculum. So as they were leaving, the minister said to us, he said, "Well, I'll see you all in Cairo," and we just sort of looked at each other and went, "Oh yeah," Well. They got an emergency funding from USAID, and Joe and some of his colleagues went over there well, Joe, I should let you pick up this next part.
Go ahead,
because, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so we went over there in January of 2012 to look at this single school, which was to be a model for the rest of the country, and it was in the middle of nowhere, and we're looking around. We were in the principal's office, and in walks the deputy minister of education with a big grin on his face, and says, "Welcome to the dream." And we're looking around, saying, "There's nothing here."
It's more like a nightmare.
But right in the middle of a revolution, where the Mubarak had been deposed or resigned, there was an air of possibility of something new.
Wow.
And we knew that after our work of 30 years, we knew that, times had changed. The Internet was around, things that were not in the 80s, climate change, solar energy, all of that stuff, big challenges. And so we asked them, well, what do you want for your country? So it started with an aspiration for what the country should look like. And they listed what their vision for the country was. And then we asked, well, what's your vision for the education of the students? And what they said was, we want our students to be equipped to solve our country's grandest challenges. And they listed 11 of them. And so Deborah, along with our colleagues, developed a new curriculum. We had the freedom from the Minister of Education himself to start from the ground, from the dust up, and design an entirely new high school curriculum that would address backward design from these grand challenges. And also, there was no standards that we had to follow, and we were exempt from the national exams.
Wow!
So it was really, a tremendous opportunity.
Blank slate, tabula rasa, blank slate, for goodness sake.
Exactly.
Wow.
And so we co-developed this curriculum with them, and the incoming class, and these were residential schools, and they insisted that it would be done in English. Wow. So we took everything that we had learned from the States, and we customized it for Egypt, but the whole point was it was a repurposing of their education system for a new era that they were in based upon their aspirations.
And when we say a new era, we're going to get into this for American schools, okay? When we say a new era, what is it? Just that they saw different challenges coming up, okay? And let me just give you an example. Here in America, you guys know this, okay? And everybody we're talking to know this. The schools started because we had to have an educated public if we wanted to have the public involved in a democracy, okay? That's the basics, okay? In a nutshell, okay? But things have, over the course of time, we still need to do that, quite obviously, okay? But we also have to change with the times, okay? What did they see, or what did they want to accomplish, okay, in this repurposing? Where were they going? Because, again, you guys are the STEM education gang, okay? So they saw something in there. They were missing something. Where were they going? What did they want to accomplish? And I'll let Deborah, do you want to do this one?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Well, so they had an incredibly traditional education system that was driven by a single set of examinations which required memorization and regurgitation, and the career paths that students were able to take were completely driven by their success on these examinations. What university they would go to and what they would be able to major in was all driven by these examinations. But what they realized is that they were falling behind in terms of global competitiveness, the country's problems, and we're talking about pollution and overpopulation and urban congestion and the lack of a robust energy grid that would enable them to utilize alternative energy, the impact of climate change. All of these things were becoming more and more urgent. And they realized that they were falling behind in so many ways, and their education system was falling behind. And they just felt like they must have a greater potential in their young people, and they had to do something to change the system. And so they were able to work with the highest levels of the government to gain permission to change the way these students would be considered for university acceptance. And so they said, we're going to break the mold, basically, and you have your own, you can develop your own system of evaluation and assessment. You can develop your own curriculum. But Joe said no standards, but in fact, they wanted an internationally prestigious curriculum. And so when we designed the curriculum, we kept standards in mind all the time, because we wanted these kids to be able to compete and to attend and compete with the best and the brightest in the world. And so we made sure that everything in the curriculum, even though the curriculum was arranged in a way that nobody would recognize in this country, but in fact, if you look at it, it has all the components of a standardized curriculum. In other words, all the learning outcomes in the curriculum all do meet international standards, U.S. and international standards. So, but the need and the urgency of the problems is so great. They had to change.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. It really is. I have to ask you something, which is always, and I have to say this the right way, I'm all in favor of STEM. Believe me, I'm all in favor of STEM, science, technology, engineering, math. Who isn't? And I know we have STEAM, add the arts, etc. Okay? But STEM is STEM, which is all good. But, and you know this here, both of you, that we've lost a little bit of civics and a sense of history as we've concentrated so hard on STEM. Okay? Again, STEM's good. I don't mean to imply that. Okay? I'm going to ask you about Egypt, then I want to hear what we're doing here in the States, what you're thinking about here in the States. But did they have a sense of their history and getting their people involved in these types of things? I don't know enough about Egyptian culture per se to understand that, but what was your feeling about that? Okay, I'll go to Joe on this one. Joe.
Okay, so...
By the way, if you can answer that, I'll give you a Nobel Prize.
Well, the way we
answer that, Joe. You have 30 seconds. No, I'm just kidding. Right. Go for it. Yeah.
All right, I'll try to do that. So
you know what I mean.
The way we, yeah. So the book is not about STEM per se. The book is about the purpose of education, which includes the whole cosmos. You know, it's not limited to STEM. It basically said what we learned is that aspirations come first for your country, and then the purpose of schooling. And the purpose of schooling can encompass a wide range of humanities, legal, religious topics, as well as science and mathematics topics. But it needs to be organized around an overall philosophy or thrust of the school. You know, the Quaker schools, for example, had a philosophy and ethos about what that school was about. Okay, or religious schools like the Kiba Academy, you know, they have an idea of what that school is about. So in this case, we have an equal proportion of humanities in these STEM schools as STEM, but STEM became, for the Egyptians, a way into something new. Okay, it was an excuse, if you will. As long as you had STEM in front of it, you could do basically anything because that was the permission structure to change things. So the schools are not by any means limited to just math and science. And also what we talk about when we talk about purpose is that there has to be in purpose a moral and social dimension to it, which is why it's public. It's not just a private good. It has to be a public good as well as a private good.
Here.
So, yeah, okay. So that's why the humanities really and the arts are central to crafting a purpose.
And, absolutely. And I always say this, the whole purpose of STEM, everything you do in STEM, science, technology, engineering, math, affects society. That's the whole purpose. Yes. We don't create a vaccine for the sake of just another vaccine. We create a vaccine because society needs a vaccine.
Exactly.
Okay, in particular. Exactly. You build the bridge because society needs to go from one place to the other. Okay, and if you and when your answer was perfect, okay, Scott, I was looking for it to be perfectly honest. Okay, we have to make sure that there's a social side to all things STEM, and you guys did that. Okay, and it sounds like they thought it out as well. Go ahead, Deb. I didn't mean to interrupt. I just wanted to make that point. We've lost. I feel like we've lost that over the last number of years in American education. Maybe you guys can help me restructure it. Go ahead.
Right.
Deb?
Well, one of the things I should mention is that although the mission was specifically to focus around STEM, we made every effort that we could to engage the arts and humanities teachers in the work. And in fact, they were some of our very strongest supporters.
Of course.
They took the initiative in many, many cases to find ways to work with the STEM teachers and within the STEM curriculum to incorporate and support what the kids were learning in STEM and tie it into history, tie it into the Arabic culture. And of course, when you go to mathematics and engineering, the heart of it comes from so much that arose out of ancient Egypt. So it was easy to tie into history, and we tried to do that in many, many ways in our science classes, and the humanities teachers likewise tied their subjects into the science classes. So yes, there was a really there's a tight interweaving there.
And you were allowed, again, you were given a blank slate. You were allowed to present that and make it happen. Yes. Here in the States, and you both know this without question, okay, we have silos, okay, within our education. Yes. I know this is what you guys want to talk about here, okay? A new era, new urgency, okay? Right. Talk about that, okay? Deb, I'm going to continue with you. Okay, the urgency. Where are we on urgency? Okay, talk about this and repurposing. And I think the word urgency is really important.
It is. It's urgent from two different standpoints that I see. One is what we need as a nation and where we want to go as a nation, because clearly we're floundering right now. And I don't think we want to get into a whole discussion of
just in case you're just waking up like the cicadas, okay?
Right.
And you missed it. All of them can buy the New York Times. All 17 trillion of them can buy the New York Times and catch up. Yeah, I agree with you.
But it's a different world, and the challenges of the world, everything from AI and climate change and housing and food insecurity and the pandemic and violence and so forth and so on, as well as the challenges like the climate change and what's going to be the tremendous immigration, mostly global immigration driven by climate change and other patterns like that. That's at a larger level. And then you have the threat of what's going to happen to our democracy. And we need citizens who understand what the Constitution really says and what it takes to be a citizen, and that there's another half of this sentence that not only do you have rights, but you have responsibilities. And so education needs to meet the needs of the culture and the society, the country. At the same time, in order to do that, we have to have kids for whom education is meaningful. And we hear so much about kids who are feeling like, they're feeling disconnected from what's happening in the classroom. Their world is a world of bullying and threats of drugs and violence and AI and insecurity and so forth, and yet their classes, their curriculum, what they're being taught on a daily basis doesn't have any relevance to their world. And so what we need to do is to find a way to create a purpose of education that is meaningful both for the country and to students, and so that the students can engage in learning that they will be able to relate to on a daily basis, as the kids in Egypt could. And the difference in what happens when kids are engaged in their learning is it's so phenomenal. And basically what we did is we took the lid off of the expectations. Let me explain that a little bit. In this country, we say, well, what we expect you to either go to college or go into a career. That's the high school expectation, college and career readiness. And
by the way, I hate that term. I just like to call it career readiness, not college and career readiness. I do.
I like to go even further than that, Larry. Yeah, I like to go beyond that because what that means is that the end of their only goal is just to get into college. But what happens if you say, we're going to give you the tools to solve the grand challenges of our country. And then the curriculum is totally geared around giving them the tools to do that. These kids start to see themselves not as just going to college. These kids seem to see themselves as being able to solve and so what happens is they see college as a pathway to something else, or a career as a pathway to something else. So we took the lid off the expectations of the kids, and these kids started to perform at levels that the teachers and even college professors and other people were just astounded.
Bingo. Joe, you want to add to that at all? I got more questions.
Well, yeah, I don't.
Go.
So we tried to.
Thank you, Deb.
We had a small. Yeah, we got a small grant from the Barra Foundation in Wayne, Pennsylvania, to try the same process that we used in Egypt here in Philadelphia. And we convened a series of design studios with about 120 representatives from 70 organizations here in Philadelphia.
Nice.
To ask the question, what is your aspiration for the Philadelphia region? And given that aspiration, what is your purpose? What do you think the purpose of graduates were? And although we told them about what we did in Egypt, we left it up to them to decide what their aspirations are. And here's what they came up with in a nutshell. They basically focused on the issue of diversity and unity. And given the great diversity of this country and its continuing diversity, how do we find unity? How do we equip kids to navigate an increasingly complex legal, economic, and social systems? Okay. How do we sustain ourselves, both individually, as a community, as a country, and globally? That was their vision. So you could imagine if that's what you start with, then you wipe away the curriculum. What we did here is say that's your vision, then how you create the curriculum, and Deborah did this in Egypt, is then deconstruct what each of those words mean and what they mean for subjects. So you want to talk about diversity? You talk about diversity in every subject. You talk about biodiversity. You talk about the periodic table in chemistry, which is the material world. And then, one thing after the other. That becomes a theme that unifies the subjects together. That's what integrates the subjects across themes. And then you say, well, what are the principles, given this biodiversity, what unifies the living world? Okay? What unifies the chemical world? What unifies the social world, et cetera? So those become the sort of philosophical grounding for how you construct a curriculum. So when a kid comes into that school, they have an idea, they know what that school is about. And they come away with a greater perception, ability, insight into their world. So when they see someone, for example, if you talk about diversity, you're talking about genetic diversity, you're talking about neurodiversity, you're talking about personality disorder.
Everything.
Diversity. So everything. But then what is it that unifies, right? Like concepts of love, for example, is a unifying idea, of tolerance. These become unifying concepts amid that diversity. So that's what we're talking about when we say you need an aspiration and then you need to repurpose. And all your curriculum follows that. You don't start with the same curriculum and then sort of put a fig leaf over it and say that's what we're for.
I would agree. I want to comment. When we talk about Egypt, okay, I just want to use the two since you're using it. Egypt is its own country, okay, and the Ministry of Education everybody knows that. I'm not so brilliant to figure that out, but the Ministry of Education runs the schools in Egypt, okay?
Yes.
Right.
Here in the U.S., we have 50 Egypts, okay?
Right.
Every state runs their own education. Then just take it down even further and fill it. You mentioned Wayne, PA. By the way, my father, when I was a kid, was the manager of the Anthony Wayne Theater, just so you know. Okay, in Wayne, Pennsylvania.
Across from our offices. Yeah.
There you go. Okay, but at any rate, okay, my point is, even in Pennsylvania, you have every district, although there's kind of an umbrella, doing whatever the heck it wants. All right?
Yes.
And it's not as simple as it is. That's a bad way to use it. It's much more complicated here than it is. I love when we compare Singapore, okay? And they go, oh, look how good they did. We have plenty of districts doing that. That's a school district here, That's not a country. It's not a state.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay? And my point is, where do we start this? How do we get somebody to get on the stick and do it? Okay? Because the idea is there. The idea is good. Okay? It's great. Okay? But we talk about it in national terms. Okay? We can't because North Dakota and South Dakota are very different from Philadelphia and from Pennsylvania and New York. They just are.
Exactly.
So where do we begin? Do we have to think smaller? Okay, I'll throw that one to Deb, Professor. I'll go ahead, do that one. Yeah.
Well, that's a great question, especially to follow Joe's discussion about diversity. Absolutely. But the thing is that we've got to start, because if we don't start, we just keep talking about it, and nothing ever happens. But one of the things we really strongly believe in is these are conversations that have to be had at local levels. And because as you say, the most rural areas in the country are so very different from the most urban areas. But so we do believe that the question of aspirations is something that everybody has to buy into, and they're going to be different. And we have to start out with the premise that they'll be different. But in fact, we have a feeling, a hunch that is unsubstantiated by experience so far anyway. We have a feeling that once these conversations start at local or regional or even state levels, we have a hunch that there's going to be strong commonalities from one region to another, because we have a sense that many people have a similar dream for their kids and for the world they want to live in and the country they want to live in. But what we have to do is we have to attend to the particular context of each of the regions, and so it can't be a cookie cutter curriculum for the entire country. That's not going to work. And it's not going to work if everything comes down from a central decision source, right? Like it did in Egypt. That's not the way the country is organized or run. But we believe that these conversations need to start. And for instance, what if there were conversations within each of the 50 states to start the process.
And to start somewhere. I agree with you. We'll have to start somewhere. We got to get it going. Okay. And I want to ask this, and Deb, I'm going to ask you this. Okay, although you just spoke, but you were a professor. Okay, and then you were an education professor. Okay,
right.
and our professor emeritus. All right, on that. Right. So, which by the way, I looked up the word emeritus. It means old. I'm sorry, I have to tell you that.
That's okay.
It's Latin for old, just so you know. Okay, only kidding. All right. What are we lacking? We're always talking about this stuff. What are we lacking in education schools? Okay, everybody's always talking about this, but the people who run education come out of education schools all over the country. And although things certainly change, they need to change vastly. Okay, what's the role of education schools in all this?
Well, it goes down.
The professor. That's why I'm asking Deb. Yeah.
Yes,
ahead,
it's
Deb.
the same thing. It has to go into purpose, because the education schools are mandated to provide teachers for the system. So it's a cycle here, and you have to break the cycle somewhere. And so what we did in Egypt is we started with the high schools, and we started with training the teachers, professional development with teachers who were already tried and true teachers, albeit very traditional ones, but they were all interested and they all had a dream. And the teachers had the same kind of dream as the other people in the Ministry of Education. So we started there with massive professional development because of the new way we were asking them to teach and the new kind of curriculum that we were providing with them. But then we realized that immediately that that's not sustainable because you have to have new teachers coming into the system. And
right.
So what happened is not too long after we started to do this work in the high schools, then we started to work on under the auspices of not only the Ministry of Education, but the Ministry of Higher Education in Egypt. They realized that they needed to change the way they did teacher preparation. And so what happened is they brought in students who were doing these phenomenal projects that were related to the grand challenges. And they had these students do presentations in front of the deans and provosts and presidents of the universities there. And they all looked at each other and said, this is phenomenal, and they realized immediately the disconnect between what these students were capable of doing and the way they were preparing their teachers to teach in these high schools. And so they knew that they needed to change their teacher education programs. But it only came after they saw what was happening in the elementary, in the high schools.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe, Joe, I can pass that on to you because you are more involved in that part of the project.
So go ahead, Joe. We've got about 3-4 minutes left. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah. So in 2018, we got a new grant, $24 million. We had a $30 million one before that. This was $24 million. To work with 5 Egyptian universities to redesign their entire teacher preparation program in science and math. So we had about 50 U.S. faculty members join with the Egyptians to, again, a blank slate from the ground up. We designed 5 new programs, 180 new courses that were developed, and each of these 5 universities adopted the same courses in the same sequence. We're now in our 4th year. We're going to have graduates this coming year in this teacher preparation program. Yeah, and we'll probably we've been in Egypt for 12 years, and now the minister wants to spread. We're going to have about 29 schools. Wants to spread the whole elements and the concept of the STEM schools, which is about having purpose, to the rest of Egypt. And that'll be another project that they expect to announce in another year. Mm-hmm.
Boy, that's good. Is it the same minister as when you started?
No. No, but we've had the same. I have to give a shout out to 2 people, Dr. Rita Abasari, from the former Deputy Minister of Education, and USAID person Hala El Safari, who have been the mother and father of this. So it wasn't us. It was really the Egyptians doing it. We are partners with them. They have led this. So you need local champions, both at the state level and a local level, who believe in this process. And it will be not something, it's going to be an evolution, because as we explain and by the way, we talk about how to do this in Chapter 18 of the book, but in the first part of the book, we talk about how purposes of education have come about through different changes in our country, and it can take a while before a new purpose emerges. So, like industrial education took 40 years to emerge.
Exactly. Yeah, good point.
Right.
Very good point. Okay, thank you both. This was wonderful. Okay, I'm going to write you. I'm going to ask you for a copy of the book. I haven't read the book. I'm going through all this on the web and all that sort of stuff, so I want to read the book. This is fantastic stuff.
Please do.
Well, thank you. It's been a real pleasure.
Oh, it's fantastic. I think you're right on the right place to take STEM, okay, and move it forward. I think that's just so important these days to repurpose it for what we need. So I can't thank you both enough. Okay, my 2 Philadelphia friends. One's up in Vermont now, but so am I up here in New England.
Right. Thank you.
Joe, where are you in
much.
Philly? Where are you in Philly? I just want to end on that.
Well, our offices are I was in Conshohocken for 19 years, and now we're in Wayne. So Wayne, PA, right outside of Philly.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, because you're and so we have offices in Wayne, and we have an office in Cairo.
There you go.
We have a whole
That's a long commute between offices. You want to,
Well, I tell you, I've been there dozens of times. It's quite an ordeal.
That's great, man. I got to tell you, good old Wayne, a beautiful part of the world, right near Villanova, everybody, in case you don't know where that is. Okay?
Right,
there you go. My brother lives in Bryn Mawr, by the way. And on that note, I'm going to leave you guys go, so you have a great day. Thank you both. I wish you best for the book, and we are going to be in touch. Okay? Thank you, Joe.
Thank you so much.
You're more than welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, folks. Thank you, guys. Okay, well, were they the best? They're right. The book is, I have it linked here, and it's New Era, New Urgency, The Case for Repurposing Education. We got to start somewhere. That's that simple. The time has come. All right? So that's Joe Merlino, Deborah Pomeroy. I'm Larry Jacobs. We're going to archive over at ace-n.org. Check it out. That website's hot right now. Okay? Talk to you later. Have a great day. Thanks for listening.